Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by Lance LaDuke of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which I just saw has had 4 sunny days in 2022, and it is the 3rd week of April. Lance, how are you?
I That's it. Yeah, I mean,
4 sunny
four
days.
seems like more than I would have thought. I don't remember them.
It's
Well,
wild.
it's one of these. We're at the point where the sun comes out and everybody walks out of their house like aliens are landing. Like, what is this?
At least you all look super pasty.
Yeah, it's nearly transparent. Sunburn. I opened the refrigerator door too long. And
The sun is blinding, and so is your neighbor. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just-
that's true. Tim, put on some pants.
Again.
Yeah.
What a wonderful conversation that we just had. I almost just said with Rich Madison. That would be news.
That would
with
be news.
with Joe Dollard. He's great.
He's great. I mean, I met him. I mentioned in the thing. I met him. He's an old friend, and he pointed out before that we started recording. He and I never got real close. He was in the Navy band Euphonium player. I was in the Air Force band Euphonium player. We overlapped by 4 or 5 years, or maybe the whole time. Hell, I don't know. But we just, you kind of just get a sense of like, oh, I'm going to instantly hit it off with this knucklehead. And I did. And it's like 1986 is when I first met him. It's just shocking to think about how long ago that was now.
Can you imagine if the instrumentation doesn't work, but just work with me here? Can you imagine if you, me, and him had been in a traveling like brass quintet
man.
at the same time? Like, yeah, that.
And then put like Wes Funderburk and Tom Gibson in there and put...
Well, that's
Yeah.
5. I mean, unless you got to kick somebody out at that point. You're going to
That's
kick me
true.
out, so let's just stop.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of like who are the funny, like if you put together the biggest personality, like comedy wise, of the brass players that we know.
I was
First
going
of
to
all,
say,
we'd never make it on a stage.
Do you-
We would just never.
I was going to ask if you meant like intentionally funny or, the laugh. Because if you can add
Good
the
point.
laugh at me portion, then that absolutely boosts my resume in the comedy department.
Good.
But speaking of which, thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies.
that's
Parker
nice.
Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, and flugabone, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. A huge thank you to everyone who has gone to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. We've had a few new patrons recently. We see you. Thank you so much. Helps keep the lights on. And we just had a really good bonus episode as well with... I almost said Rich again. What's wrong with me? With Joe. Joe was so unremarkable. I'm just like, yeah, we just talked to Sam. No, who was it? Jacobs? No, it was Joe Dollard. No, just he talked about, well, you're about to. He talks about a lot of ear training, but he talks about how Chet Baker never knew what key he was in, and about his singing, and about something that Rich Madison did to learn tunes in all 12 keys. It was a great bonus episode. So
real actionable stuff.
yes. So if you would like to hear the bonus episode with Joe, which always comes out 1 week after each episode does with every guest that we have, and you'll instantly get access to a whole bunch of other bonus content, including previous bonus episodes, you can go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies. And if you could do us one favor, if you would like to support the show in a way that does not involve taking out your Amex card, if you could think of one person who would benefit from a specific episode that you've heard of the Brass Junkies, do us a favor and just write them a note and say, hey, you should listen to these two. You will enjoy this episode in spite of the host. Just be patient. There's a payout. But that would be awesome if you could help us to spread the word. Lance, anything else?
Oh, undoubtedly.
YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I think that's it. So without further ado, let us get to the conversation that we had, not with Rich Madison, but with Euphonium extraordinaire Joe Dollar.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more content by the Brass Junkies, just click on the like and subscribe button. You'll have an opportunity to see some of the greatest brass players in the world, and Andrew and me.
Today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by I'm surrounded by Euphonium legends here. We got Lance LaDuke from Pittsburgh, who's who's a Euphonium legend, and then we've got a real legend in Joe Dollar. Joe, how are you?
As in old. Yes. Old legend. Very old. That's how I am. I'm old. You can tell when you're old because you don't care. You stop caring about a lot of things.
But I'm old before my days.
Yeah.
Joe just finished telling us that he believes that, like, you know, when you die, that's it, you're done. There's no sequel. Like, your time is limited.
Dark that way.
And then we pointed out that you were spending like an hour and a half with us on this podcast, and you could see him doing some math about like the choices that he had made in his life to bring him to this moment.
It's all good. I love you guys. I've only worked with Andrew just the one time with the Army Blues, which was a little really fun, a little terrifying because it's such a good little group of animals. They're all just animals, every one of them. So it's a little terrifying to get in front of that group.
It wasn't it?
So,
I've been preaching my whole life to students, and like, you always want to be the worst player on stage. That's where all the growth happens. But like, I don't necessarily seek out that much of a gap. At the Army tuba euphonium workshop right before COVID, right? Yeah, that was like right before everything shut down. That was February of 2020. Joe and I were the two featured soloists with the Army Blues.
Yeah. And I think that was the last tune we played was Viral Load. Right?
What key?
Yeah. No, it was fun. But that was the only time I've gotten to work with Andrew. And then Lance and I occasionally would see each other in the Boneyard up in Arlington.
That's right. Yeah.
With long faces and tiredness.
Well, we were saying beforehand that it's probably a very fortunate thing for both of us that we were not in the same band, because we would have made even more mayhem. So Joe holds a distinction. Actually, you were telling us beforehand. You set a record for the Navy band.
Oh yeah, the most write-ups in the Navy band, I believe. These are hard facts to verify, but I don't even know anybody else that's close. 32 times written up in the Navy band.
And how long were you in the Navy band?
21 years.
21 years.
21 years.
So that's not bad. It's only a couple of
years. I almost got kicked out after 6 or 7 years. I was really like, I'd lost all allies in the Navy band. Everybody thought I was hilarious when I got there, and then I started getting in trouble, and then I got cynical, and then people just started backing away. And then after 7 years, I actually started to see a counselor, because I was a mess. So
it sounds like Lance's first marriage minus the counselor part.
Yeah, so I go in, I'm talking to this guy, and he's like,
"No, it had the counselor part."
So this guy's like, "Well, you must respect these people a lot," and I'm like, "Haven't you been listening to me?" And he goes, "Well, you're letting them ruin your life. You need to either leave or." And anyway. He really helped, and I started fixing my part of the relationships. For instance, Roger and I got along horribly for quite a while.
Roger Barron, yeah.
And then I started being nice to him, and lo and behold, he started being nice to me back. I didn't know I was so much a part of that equation until and so we got along actually the whole rest of my career fairly well.
Yeah,
Roger's he's a very straight ahead guy, and he's an animal player. He's a much better player, I think, than he gets credit for.
100%.
Yeah, I don't know anybody else that gets that kind of sound from the bottom to the top of his horn that consistently. Mm-hmm. He's like inside of his tone always, from the bottom to the top. It's just always there. And
it's quite a compliment.
There's not many guys that can do that, but he's abrasive, and a lot of people don't get along with him.
Super direct, and
And not
rubs
in a
people
funny
the wrong
way.
Yeah.
but
like he has opinion, like he has reasons for his opinions, his strong held opinions, and it's like, well, you always know where you stand. And I never really had a problem with him.
Well, I think Roger worked really hard to get where he was. And so I think he sometimes would get frustrated when he heard people not living up to the standard that he had really worked hard to. He worked a lot to get his sound to do that. He really, so I think he was just wanting everybody else to deal with the same standard that he had put on himself. I don't think he was wanting other people to sound any better than he wanted himself to sound. I don't think he had a double standard going on. So he was frustrated when he heard some players not sound like he thought they should be sounding for the fame they had attained. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
he took me to task as a young player because I went to Michigan State. He had gone to Michigan State instead of the Falcone. And then I don't know if you remember. Do you know where we first met?
Was it Falcone? No.
1986. Really? Yeah. You and Mark Dickman were there.
Because you were a junior and I was. And you aren't you? You're one of the few people that won the junior category and the artist.
I only won the junior one. I never won the upper one.
I thought you'd done.
And that was one of the reasons that Roger kind of got in my face was like I won that one, and then I went to Michigan State and had a wonderful time. And he was like, I saw him. I don't know. I think I was an undergrad, or it was either as an upperclassman, or right after I got into the Air Force Band, because I mean, that was 5 years, 5.5 years. Fast forward, Falcone Air Force Band, and I saw him, and he was like, "What happened to you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, you had all this promise, and you won that thing, and then you just like frittered it all away. Like you just like goofed around. Like what? He just was like super direct."
Yeah.
And I needed it. It was like a really important, impactful thing.
And that's the beautiful thing about Roger, and especially in the military where people will say one thing to you and another thing to somebody else. Roger never. If he had something to say, he would say it right to your. Yeah. So, but let me just wrap up the whole military thing by saying that even though I got in a lot of trouble in the Navy band, and there was many times where I didn't want to be in the band, I was very frustrated in the band when I was there. Now, being on the back side of this and having the retirement, and I would totally do it again. I would totally do it again, and it was totally worth it. And I wish I would have known that when I was in, how good retirement is if you can make it there. The health benefits, the retirement, all of that. And I knew it was a good job when I was in, but I didn't appreciate it for what it was. I don't think, and I wish I could have just taken it more for what it is. I'm a strange mix of positive and negative. So I was the positive, the optimist side of me is frustrated because I always think about how good the band could sound. God, this band, because I heard the players, and for me that was the ultimate frustration. It's like having a Formula One car and then having your grandmother go out and drive it 15 miles an hour around the track for 21 years. And you're just dying to see that car go, and every once in a while you get a guest conductor in front of the band and it starts to just wake up like a sleeping dragon. And so that's the positive side of me, wanting it, but that can lead to extreme, cynicism and darkness and
resentment.
Yeah, rather than just saying, and then I start to feel like I'm the only one that knows this piece of information. When everybody in the band knows, and everybody in the military bands is well aware of what's going on, and they just start making the best of the gig. And I wish I could have done that a little more, because players there were great.
Yeah, I was in the same boat, and I didn't get over the hump. That's
never
why
did.
I ended up leaving.
I never did either. I made it but I made it. And it was good, but lots of trouble and lots of darkness. And I feel like I went in an optimist, and then I became this different person. And then I came out, and it took me about 3 years to get back to kind of the sort of person I was when I went in.
If you're up for talking about it, you're going through this therapy and you realize only thing I can change is me. I'm putting words in your mouth. So what's like day one when you realize, okay, I need to do something different? And so
It
what
was-
what was that like? You go to work and all of a sudden you're like,
I don't think it was a day one. It took the guy, a long time to kind of, a good counselor. I don't think he ever. I think they just listen. I always describe it. It just felt like somebody was slowly turning you around, and then pretty soon you see things very differently. But it's a very slow change. I still call that guy. I always call that guy my second father. I still call him from time to time. He came to visit here a while back.
Wow.
And great guy. Great guy.
I had
really,
a
really helped me
super
out.
influential therapist when I was in DC too that really kind of kept me rolling down the road. And so how long would you say it took for, you talked about Roger and your interaction with
things
him for
yeah.
you. So what your relationships in the band, how long? What
It was
that
pretty
like?
quick. I was actually amazed that when I changed my side of it, I was amazed how quickly things at work felt different.
What would you say
In general.
what would you guess like behaviorally what changed?
I just accepted. I think what I was just. I think I realized that first of all, being nasty and mean and cynical to people wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to help change anything, and it was making things worse. And that seems really obvious, but it wasn't to me for a long time, and so I would be cynical and dark and mean. And I was right. I would recognize the situation and say something, and then of course I would get kind of negative energy back, and then I would feed off that and get even worse and worse and worse. But really, if you kind of say, well, this sucks and I'd like to change it, but then don't put all that negativity and cynicism out there, but try to do it in a better way, then people oftentimes, are much better to you. Strangely enough, if you're nice to people, they're much nicer back. I know it's weird, isn't it? But to be fair, I never had that problem anywhere else except the military. I didn't, at North Texas, I was not like that when I was in school. So it was a new experience for me, and it was very enlightening and good, and
And it sounds like it's been a lasting change. Like this is
I think
the
so.
time
Well,
before and the time after.
I don't think now it would be such an issue. I think once you get out of the military, that issue would disappear, and I wouldn't be that person. But I think going down the kind of that dark road did teach me a lot about people and the politics of the day. Like today, people are very divided. But what's funny about that is a lot in Texas. Well, what's funny about that? I live in Texas, and it's this strange dichotomy because you have people on both wild sides of the political spectrum, and I'm very left, but there's people in my neighborhood that are very right-wing that you'd think I wouldn't get along with. But when you're in person with these people, they're very nice. They do anything for you. They give you the shirt off their back. They're neighbors of mine. So as long as you don't talk politics to them, things are and it's kind of enlightened me that sometimes what people think they are, they're not.
Yeah.
Like
That's the part we've forgotten, right?
Yeah, you think you're hardcore right conservative, but really, and there are people that are not nice that are on both sides of the political aisle, but a lot of people that have very extreme political views are pretty good people and nice, and really, if none of that came into play, you could hang with them quite easily. So
it's hard to sell ads if everybody's getting along.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
it's really weird. Texas is a great example of that because you've got people so far out on the political spectrum, but then when you meet them, they are so nice. And you can't imagine, but when they start talking politics, the stuff that comes out of their mouth is not nice. But when they're not, they're different people. It's strange that our politics have kind of I just don't think people are maybe what they think they are sometimes.
Yeah,
on both sides. On both sides.
Yeah, just the level of
Why are we
civility.
talking about this? This is the Brass Junkies.
Well, this is the Trojan horse. Like
Okay.
people always think, oh, they're gonna.
That's another episode about mouthpieces. This will be great. I can't wait to talk about bore size.
What?
Heavy caps, yay! Cryogenically freeze.
51D, or no,
There it is.
this is a 51 because I play my little Yamaha now. So I play the 51D with my big horn, but now I play my little horn again. So
So what are you doing now? Let's jump from. We don't have to talk about the military stuff anymore. But so what now?
I came here. I came
You were
here to
doing lawn care before. Yeah.
No, we came down to Texas for retirement because both of us went to school at North Texas, and we loved Austin. So we looked in Austin first. Austin, very crowded now. So we kind of live on the outskirts of Austin. Built a house, and then started teaching the schools here. Contacted both of us to private teach, which we were not planning on doing. But it turned out great, and we did that for about 7 years. But when Zoom hit, Zoom was the enemy for private teaching. I could not take it. I couldn't do it. I did it for about a year and a half, and then we were going to finish up the year and then possibly retire. And we made it to December. I was like, I'm out. I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. It was driving me out of my mind. I couldn't play with the students. I couldn't hear them well. I couldn't tell whether they're playing with a metronome. The speed goes up and down, but you can hear if they're with the click, that means they're with it. It's just, I was doing the best I can. I think for what it was, I was doing a good job, but it was very frustrating, and I was probably ready anyway. Anyway, I did that. I had about 50 students, and I taught both of the middle school jazz bands, which was a hoot. Loved it. Loved it. I had never done anything like that before, and I loved it. Arranged all the music and wrote all the tunes, and
cool.
And just seeing kids really excited about playing something that wasn't their band music, because I would do everything. We did some rock charts, some reggae, whatever. I did Back in Black and some Carlos Santana stuff, and whatever I wanted to do that I thought they could do. Yeah, when you hear 30 kids in a middle school jazz band going da dee 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 da dee da dee da 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 da, and trying to figure that out, and eventually you're gonna go da dee dee da dee da dee da dee da da, and they're banging their heads, and they're just
that's awesome.
It was really, it reminded me how when we all start, how excited you are when you open that case and you see that shiny instrument, and those early feelings about your horn. Yeah. So we did like we have a Founders Day parade. We have like a local parade, a local little small town parade. So after 1 year doing that, I built a big we built a float. I had all the parents come. We built a big float. We put all the jazz band kids on it. We played, and people just went banonkers. And then the next year we did a double decker. We did like a New Orleans hotel.
Nice.
We had 54 kids on this float with their instruments out the side, wailing on it. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever been a part of. It was
That's
great.
Fantastic. So are you still teaching or coaching groups, or?
I'm done. I'm out.
And what about playing?
Well, funny you should say that, because COVID hit, and I stopped teaching, and I thought I might stop playing. I've never thought I had to keep playing, and I've always wanted to, but I always thought, well, if I don't want to do it, I won't do it. So I stopped for a while, and that was not good. That was not a good place for me. I just went, I don't know if it was, maybe it was COVID plus that, but I just went into a massive dive. So, a year or so ago, I quickly picked up the horn. I got in a bad community band and a bad jazz band. I played trombone in I shouldn't say bad, a community band. They're all,
That's
it's
awesome.
your average.
Yeah.
And there's some really good players in there, and there's some players that don't play very much. And same way with the jazz band. There's sometimes it sounds good, and there's sometimes where it doesn't. But it's really fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. And
Those
cool
are so
people
fun.
usually, and
It is, and we hang out. We go to my wife and I are in the community band, which they just love us because they can play.
The ringers, yeah.
Yeah, and then but we go out for beer after every rehearsal and hang out, and it's just a hoot.
That's what it's about, right?
Yes, it really is, and I think when you're kind of done, I don't want to say I'm done because I'm still playing my horn and everything, but my career is not. I'm not thinking about my career anymore.
Appearing on this podcast is the last house on the block. So
Yeah.
you're officially done.
So I'm still playing. I play I'm doing I'm doing Yellow Rose of Texas variations with the community band.
There you go.
God, you're in Texas, you have to play that.
You do
right?
have to. I did that with River City, and I played what's the tune at the beginning before the melody starts? There's like a Home on the Range or something.
Yeah, it's
That
kind of a
thing.
Western sounding tune. Yeah.
I played that on harmonica. I taught myself to
that's
play that.
great.
I was like, well, I should learn how to play harmonica.
I
So was-
thought about writing words to it and singing because it
Yeah, that
sounds
would
like
be good, too.
Sounds like a. I'd need a guitar so I could.
Yep. I did that on Ring of Fire with River City. I taught myself the guitars,
Did you really?
the chords I needed for Ring of Fire. Yeah.
So I'm still playing. I'm still doing a lot of jazz and ear training. I just played. Was it No, it wasn't Surtech. It was. What did I just play? In
Nerd Tech.
Skirtex,
in
Wordtex.
Atlanta. Which one was that? Up in Atlanta, just now. At Kennesaw State.
I don't know.
Burn Tech.
That was
Surtech.
That was Surtech.
That would be Surtech.
That was Surtech. And then I'm going to play Gebert Tech in a month up in Iowa.
Very
Jazz, little jazz performances, and I play a little jazz brunch in Austin once in a while, which is a really hard gig. I play with a bass player named Tom Crail. He's a tuba player too. Do you know Tom, Andrew? If you're,
I don't think so.
he's like a local legend. Awesome bass, electric and upright and tuba player, and he's just got ears of gold. He's the kind of guy that could sit down with any band anywhere with his tuba or an upright bass and just play. It doesn't matter whether he knows the tune or the style. He's going to sound great. And he can just play things by ear
Chameleon.
fantastically. Yeah. So anyway, he has this little jazz brunch that he does, and he invites me to play once in a while. But it's only him and a guitar player and me.
Oh.
It's 3 hours.
Ooh.
And he likes to play gypsy jazz. So he'll play these, that's why I'm going to play a couple of them up in Gebert Tech because I really like them.
Gebert Tech.
But they're Django tunes. Do you guys ever listen to much Django Reinhardt? They're old Django tunes, and so these tunes they look easy on the page because they're not like bebop. They don't have a lot of changes. They're pretty simple changes, but then it'll be like, okay, here we go. So when you're soloing, it jumps right along, and it's kind of a jumpy little style and a lot of triads instead of bebop licks. You got to play a lot of triad stuff, and it's the hardest gig I think I've ever done, but it's great fun.
Good for you.
I hope it doesn't pay much because those are usually
It
the best
doesn't
ones.
pay anything.
Even better. So I want to make sure we talk about ear training, which is an important thing to you, and improvisation, which is an important thing for us to talk about. And I want to talk about Rich Madison and his influence, and just I don't know that as many people remember him as should. And I think as often as we can talk about him and what he did and how he taught and all that stuff, I think for the better. Look at there.
Hey. Is that
Learn
Lance?
everything in every key.
But before we do, let me remind you that at the Mary Papert School of Music in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at Duquesne University, there is a wonderful, wonderful set of programs and folks you can study with on each of the brass instruments, believe it or not. Every single one of the brass instruments, all of them. And so we want to invite you to click on the link in the show notes. They've been a long-term sponsor of the show. And please indicate your support of our show by going and visiting their site. And super special thanks to Jim, Jazz Brunch Nova for making it possible. It'll be fun.
Hakeem posted a photo of him on Easter playing with Jim, and I to his Facebook stories, and I replied "bubble butt" with an exclamation point, and then I got a heart reaction back from Hakeem, which was good. Joe, this is apropos of absolutely nothing that we're talking about.
All right.
But I have
Hit
to
me.
stick this in because you mentioned Back in Black, which reminds me of the greatest quote I've ever heard from anyone in the music business ever, which is from Angus Young, the lead guitarist, of course, from AC/DC.
Yeah.
This was back in 1991 when they were on their Razor's Edge tour, which I saw as a teenager. And he was asked by the interviewer, he said, so the interviewer said, so your critics say that that you've made 10 albums and that they all sound exactly the same. Like, how do you respond to that? And he said his answer was, I would politely tell them that we've recorded 12 albums and that they all sound exactly the same because we have a sound that we love and that our fans love,
There you go,
and not everything needs to be complicated.
Yeah,
it was just
right.
like that was the whole,
Right.
and then the interview just kept right on moving. So
Next.
Yep, that was good stuff. All right, so do we want to go Rich Madison?
Let's go Rich Madison.
Great.
Yeah. So did you grow up in Texas?
No, I grew up in the Northwest, Montana, Nebraska. My dad was with Boeing. All the ICBM missiles that we all hear about?
Mm-hmm.
They're all over the Northwest. And the Air Force mans them, but Boeing put those in and updates them. Go around, they put So my dad was on one of the missile crews, the Minuteman missile crews that went all over the Northwest, updating all those missiles round and round. So we lived in Montana like 3 times when I was a baby and a little older, and then in high school. All over the Northwest, Seattle, Sedalia, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Wyoming, all over. We'd live in a place for a year and a half, and they do like 20 or 30 sites in that area, and then we'd move to another place. So
Were your
it's quite
parents
a
musical
wild-
at all?
No.
Well, so so if
they
you
were not.
As a matter of fact, there was a black hole where music would go.
Impersonate your father singing a song for us.
No, my mom. Well, let me tell you, my mom would play records constantly, so she loved music, and I grew up listening to Burt Bacharach and Dionne Warwick and Ray Conniff singers, old stuff, old things, and Dean Martin and Frank and big band singers. But she would put on a record, and she was a massive house, she's Susie Homemaker. Mm-hmm. So she'd put on records all day long and do housework. So I grew up listening to a lot of that stuff, which was awesome. My dad did play trumpet in high school, and when I was in 6th grade, my friend said, "Hey, you want to play the cornet?" And I didn't know what a cornet was. I thought he was talking about a clarinet. So I was like, "Sure." I didn't know anything about it. Sure, because he was playing it. He's my friend, so I'll play it with you.
Do.
So my parents went to the music store to rent a cornet and came back, and they opened the case, and I was like, "Oh, it's a trumpet." You didn't tell me it was a trumpet. And my dad, this is before I knew my dad had ever played an instrument. And my dad scooped it up, put the mouthpiece in, and played what I'm sure was horrible, like Twinkle Twinkle, or it was a little tune. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was a god. I just thought this man can do anything. This man is a god among anything my dad can do. My dad, I always thought too highly of him anyway when I was young. But when he did that, man, I was just like, I was floored. Because, of course, I couldn't get a sound on. I didn't even understand how it worked. So this will segue into the ear training thing.
Okay.
So I started playing songs. My dad showed me some fingerings, and I started to figure out a few little songs by ear, which is perfect. And then they went to the music store. This was in the summer before school started. They went to the music store, and they got some of these like 50 songs of the 70s.
Oh yeah, I had those. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't know how to read.
Close Encounters, Star Wars.
Well, I was before that, so I was,
Connor. Oh, okay. So
I was like, something like that.
Oh yeah.
But I didn't know how to read music, but I knew from my fingering chart, well, that note was this button, and that note was this button, and that was, so I could just figure out the buttons, and then I would just play them by ear, like I knew how they went. So by the end of the summer, with no instruction at all, I was playing tunes, and I was starting to figure out other tunes by ear, right? Beautiful. Had a nice sound, blowing very naturally, no issues at all. So I walk into 6th grade trumpet class, and they stick
Teacher didn't know what was coming.
Now I want you guys to tell me your experiences, but they put a Rubank book in front of me with an egg with a fingering on it. They said, "That's an F. That's this fingering. Play it 4 counts." And I'm staring at the book. Okay, next note. And then by 2 weeks, my ears are shut off completely. I'm not hearing anything anymore because I'm looking at the eggs on the page. And then that
Became
continued.
visual instead auditory.
Totally, and that continued all the way through college. Even through, I was a jazz studies major, and
Why
got a
jazz studies?
because of Rich Madison. So now we'll go back to Rich.
Yeah.
So I'm in high school. I'm in Montana, and Rich Madison comes to my high school. At this
there we
point, I didn't even know if I wanted to be a music major. I was a real math, science.
You still on Cornet?
I had switched to Euphonium in the middle of my 11th grade, middle of 11th grade.
Why?
Because didn't know how to play trumpet. I didn't know how to play. I didn't know how to play trumpet, and I was a practice fiend. I was in All-State. But All-State in Montana is like region is in Texas. I mean, it's a much lower level. But I was a decent trumpet player, and but I was practicing like 4 or 5 hours a day, and I was playing so badly that my lips were bleeding. I was bruised, and the more I practiced, the worse I got. Really,
Yeah, I was the same way.
Yeah, my private teacher one day was like, "Bring home this baritone and try it." I was like, "I don't want to try that crap," So I brought it up. I brought it home that night, and of course I got it out and instantly could play anything I could play on the trumpet better, and it felt great.
Yeah.
It didn't hurt. And
You should try a tuba mouthpiece, man. It basically massages your face while you play.
So I went back the next day and told my band director, I'm now a euphonium player. I was his first trumpet player, his all-state first trumpet player. He was like, "What? You can't do that." And I was like, well, I am. And I never played trumpet again in high school. Now I can play. I have a trumpet now, and I taught my kid trumpet, and I can play trumpet now. But I just didn't understand air, and I was just tied up in knots, as a lot of young players are. So anyway, Rich Madison comes to my high school. Rich comes to my high school. I had a real good jazz band director in high school, so we had a decent jazz band, and I was trying to learn how to improvise, and I was starting to lift some solo. He had us lifting some solos and doing a little bit.
Were you doing on euphonium?
On trombone and euphonium.
So he let you do the euphonium.
Oh yeah, the improv stuff he let me do on euphonium, and then I did the parts on trombone.
So many teachers won't let they're just like, nope.
Yeah.
You got to play. But thank goodness you didn't have that one.
So Rich came, and what do I need to say? Rich. I mean, for the young players that haven't heard Rich, he's not just a good jazz euphonium player. He is a really top-notch jazz player. Period. He's just, for any instrument. I used to go when I was in college. Him and Clark Terry were good friends. And Clark would come down to Fort Worth and play in the Caravan of Dreams for like 3 nights, and Rich would always go down there for a night. He'd have Rich down, and they'd play a whole night together. And Rich could not only keep up with Clark, he could smoke Clark Terry a lot of times, and Clark just loved it. Clark knew what Rich could do, and just blown away. You could tell Clark would just listen to him and just like, whoa, who is this guy, Rich could keep up with pretty much anybody. And anyway, he blew me away, and I was like, I don't care if that guy teaches in Fairbanks, Alaska. That's where I'm going. And fortunately for me, he was at North Texas, and really fortunately for me, Don Little was down there, and Don's the one that really taught me how to play. Rich taught me how to play jazz, and mostly inspired me is what Rich did. Rich was just a constant source of inspiration and awe, just to be around somebody that could play that well and was so into it. He always was just so into it. He practiced his butt off, way into it, just loved it. He just you couldn't be around him and not be. By the end of his improv classes, you'd go into class, you'd be all overwhelmed and down, and God, I got so much to do, and I didn't do it. And by the end of class, you just couldn't wait to get to a practice room. Everybody would just beeline for a practice room to do what he had us doing in class. He's a very inspirational guy, really motivating guy.
And you were there at the same time as Mark Dickman, yeah? Were you guys classmates?
Mark came a little later than me. I think Mark got his bachelor's at Troy, maybe, or someplace. He's gonna be angry at me for not knowing this. But anyway,
because I met both
came
you
later.
guys at the same time. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he came later, and then
And then Joe froze. I mean, it's like he gets so emotional when he's talking about Rich Madison. It just like overwhelms him. Sometimes he doesn't even know what to say.
He's
and
so
then he's
worried.
back.
He's so worried about Mark being pissed that he didn't know where he went to school that you just clammed up.
Yeah.
There,
What? Did my audio cut off? What happened?
yeah, everything
You just
froze.
So you were fine.
Oh, I did a speed test. I even checked out. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Uh-oh, that's
We're
bad.
fine. We're fine. Don't worry.
We're fine.
Deep breath. Deep breath.
It said you're unstable, Joe.
I am unstable. Anyway, so I ended up, that's how I ended up going and seeing Rich. And he was just, the thing about it was a little frustrating was Rich got very frustrated because he just wanted me to go all in jazz. He just, he would give you unbelievable amounts of stuff to work on. And he didn't understand that I was sitting in a room for an hour or 2 hours working on my sound every day. He was like, well, why are you doing that? You got all this shit to learn. Why are you playing eggs?
What's the bridge between North Texas and Navy Band?
I finished my bachelor's. I was at North Texas for almost 10 years, in and out of school. I was a car mechanic for a while. Did all kinds of stuff because I was working my way through school. And ended up playing in the Dallas Wind Symphony. I was one of the founding members of the Dallas Wind Symphony.
Wow.
And then was working on my master's when the Navy Band audition came up. I was the dreaded one class away from your master's degree, which I also would have never used. So who cares? I used to worry about that, and now I'm like, well, what difference would that have made? Yeah, I had a principles of research. Now it was a big class. It was the class. That one class that you got to take that everybody doesn't want to take to get your master's degree.
Yeah.
And it was a master's in jazz studies. So I guess I maybe could have taught at a little college somewhere or something. I don't know. But
you ended up doing pretty okay for yourself.
But I won the Navy audition, and then Roger was like, "You got to come in right away," And I was like, "Okay," and I dropped out of school, thinking that oh God, they're going to take me any minute. Well, of course, it was 3 months or 4 months before they got me in boot camp, and I could have easily finished the degree in the semester and everything. It wasn't Roger's fault. He thought they could get me in quickly, but it turns out, and it doesn't really matter. I was a little bitter about it for years, but it doesn't really matter because it wouldn't have changed anything.
Was it, I mean, I don't know, sounds like no, but was it difficult to, your heart, maybe that's not even fair. You were spending a lot of time playing jazz, and then to prepare for the military band audition.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I still have a problem balancing the two things out. If I play a lot of jazz, of course, it starts to tear up my sound sometimes. Now, when I'm really playing super strong and really feeling focused on my horn, I can play quite a lot of jazz and it won't affect me. But eventually, if I lay off the Rose shoes, you need to play Rose shoes and stuff. It's just like if you were to play only high technical stuff on your instrument and not tend to your sound. Eventually, things will start getting a little, funky in a ride, don't you think? Is that how you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of almost like stretching. It's like breathing exercises where I'm tall. I got big lungs. I don't need to do them, but if I don't do them, then it just kind of things start to just tighten up a little bit. And and I'm not getting any younger.
It was very difficult at North Texas to balance the two things out because I always wanted to be a good jazz player, and of course the 1 o'clock set. I never could make the 1 o'clock. Conrad Herwig was there for years when I was there. No way I'm ever gonna. At North Texas, you got kind of lead players. So if you're leading the 1, the next guy under you is actually leading the 2. And then leading the 3, and the jazz player, was Conrad, and I was the jazz player in the 2, and there was no way I was ever gonna compete with Conrad. Conrad practiced all day long, every day, all jazz, all day long, every day. Blew off his classes, which looking back, I kind of wish I would have done too. But I was too hung up on getting good grades. And
I must pass this class.
Yes. I must get an A in music history that I'll never remember.
Before we go on, Joe, I forgot to tell Andrew that Houchin Horns aims to spread the joy of music through providing the highest level of products, services, and resources to the brass playing community. They have free domestic shipping on all new items, excluding sheet music, and free domestic returns on new instruments and mouthpieces when you order online at houtinhorns.com. Not Houghton's. Houghton's.com is a totally different thing. Don't go there. Go to houtinhorns.com. That's the one you want to go to. They do repairs and customizations in-house at houtinhorns.com, not Houghton's. And browse vintage and consignment instruments also at houtinhorns.com. You can schedule free equipment consultations with one of their team of professional musicians, which you would do at houtinhorns.com. You have extensive news and resources page. Guess where? Nope. Houtinhorns.com. And then you can watch over 200 unique videos at Houchin Horns YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Houchin Horns. And if you enter the promo code Junkies at online checkout, you receive 10% off your purchase from houtinhorns.com. Some limitations aptly. Apply.
So
Wow,
Mark,
that was good.
Mark needs to make houtinshorn.com, which is just like a photo of him just pointing at his horn. That's it. It's just one photo. That's the whole. No links, no nothing.
All right, Joe Dollard has a soapbox, and we would like to put you on that soapbox right now.
Yeah.
This soapbox
Now
has
that
to
you've
do with
heard
ear
my-
training.
Yes, now they've heard my sad tale. So I go to North Texas. I get a jazz. I get a jazz studies degree, and I'm actually quite good at improvising. Took all the improv classes, and I took advanced improv classes, and listened to what Rich said. Practiced my butt off. If you put changes in front of me, pretty good. You take those changes away, and I couldn't play squat. I really couldn't play very well at all. And it wasn't until I got in the Navy band that I started examining this situation and thinking, I think I went to a few sessions, and as long as it was a key tune that I knew, in a key that I knew, I'd sound great. But if it was a tune I didn't know, or if it was a key I wasn't comfortable with, or maybe even a tune I hadn't heard, or whatever, not good at all. Not good at all. And I started to look at why, and it's because I couldn't. My ear training had sucked at North Texas. Now they do things differently. I don't want to bash North Texas because they teach differently now, I think, than when I was there. Rich was there when I was there, and I think for Rich, and I love him more than anybody, but he could not comprehend not playing by ear, because he had played by ear since the time he had picked up his instrument, as I would have if the school system would have. If the Rubank book, he started like I did, and then just kept going, as most players of his decade, of his vintage did. They all played by ear. Jack Peterson, Dan Hurley, all those guys, those old jazz guys, Jamie Abersol, same way. They all play by ear. That's how they all learn how to play. And then later they learn the jazz theory. So along comes Joe. Well, they start laying all this theory and scales in front of me, and I'm very, I was a physics and a math guy. That's what I was into. So my brain, that's how my brain works. That orally is like, I love music. It's not ever what I was really very good at. I think maybe that's why I went into music, because I loved it, but I wasn't very good at it. So it seemed like something I could actually spend a lot of time staying interested in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I started looking at this, and I lifted solos. That helped a lot. That was like kind of one side of it. But when I lifted solo, it was almost a timbre thing. So if I was doing a trumpet, for instance, I could put on a Clifford Brown solo, and I could tell what he was playing after I'd lifted for a while. I could tell what he was playing, and I could play it. But it was kind of the timbre of the instrument, because if you took the same thing and played it on piano, couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
It does.
That makes sense.
So it almost was a timbre thing and not a pitch thing or a singing thing. So I found that program. mean, I did some things in the interim. I tried to do some things, but when I found that program,
What program would that be, Joe?
Oh, if you go to a website called I Was Doing All Right, iwasdoingallright.com.
Which we are linking to in the show notes.
Yeah, you can link to it. There's an ear trainer on there. It's an online ear trainer. It's free. You don't need to leave an email address. You don't need to leave a credit card. No cookies, no crumbs, no nothing. It's all just out there for free. I've been using it for 12 years, and it is the best online ear trainer it's the best ear trainer I've ever seen anywhere.
That's quite an endorsement.
So I started using it a long time ago, and I don't know if I can screen share. Can I screen share? Can you see this if I pull it up? Can we
Maybe,
try?
but some people will be only listening to it.
Yeah,
so
let's not do
Okay,
that.
let's
Actually,
not do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna pop it up because if you look at it, you'll see some tabs. There's some interval. There's one that's called intervals, chords, melodies, and progression. So I started with intervals, and it'll play random intervals. Now you can select, major seconds, minor seconds. I didn't do any of that because the idea of this is not theoretical ear training. I'm going to say that again. This is not theoretical. So, for instance, when I was at North Texas, we all take ear training classes in theory. I could do the Bach chorales very well. So you play me a Bach chorale, I could write it out. I could do all that. Theoretically, I knew what was going on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about picking up your horn and having somebody play a little tune, and then your fingers know where those pitches are. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So right now, you guys push down, you see something on the page, you push down a button, and then you play the note. So your brain and your body for years have been going button, sound, button, sound, button, sound. What I'm talking about is the opposite of that. It's the same thing, it's just sound, button, sound, button, sound, button. So it's the same wire. I tell people it's the same wire in your brain. The wire is there. It's just the electricity has never run the opposite way. It's never gone backwards. So a lot of times when I teach this and I have people start it, they're better at it than they know they are if they sort of let it happen. So when you hear an interval, when you hear that, you have to hear boom, and then you see if your fingers know what that is. And you would be surprised because your finger, for me now it's this, but for you it's this. You've heard that pitch and you've pushed that button a basquillion times. Your brain knows that pitch goes with that button. The problem is it's just never gone that direction before. You've never gone from the sound to your button. So you kind of have to sing the song, the sound in your head, and then you see if your fingers know which button to push. But you sing the song, the pitch in your head, and you try to push the button. And if it's right, that's great. If it's wrong, that's also great. Because then your brain will learn that's not what it is. It's not this, it's this. And your brain will learn from the mistakes you make, your brain will learn also. So as long as you're singing in your head, you will eventually start learning. So I started with intervals very slowly. The hardest part of that was getting the first note. So I'd hear a note. A lot of times I'd miss it by a half step or a step or something. But once I got the first note, it seemed like I could always get the second one much easier. And that turns out to still be, sometimes when I'm doing patterns or something or learning something, that's still the hardest part is the first note. Because it's kind of like the cold relationship to your instrument. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like
So if you don't have perfect pitch, you're kind of guessing.
It's like somebody standing at a xylophone or a marimba, and you might be standing up here, and and your body doesn't know where it is, and so that first pattern or that first few intervals, you're figuring out where that marimba is, and you're figuring out where that pitch center is to your fingers again. Mm-hmm. So I started with intervals, and this program is great because you can do it manually. If I say play manual and I click it, it'll play 2 notes and then it won't play anymore. And so you can figure out those 2 notes. You can also, when I first started, I slowed it way down so it would give me more time like that. But after you get going, after you're pretty good at that, you can set it to start putting a delay. and you can have it says longest, longer, long, medium, short, shortest. You can have it go down. So if I set it on short delay and I pick up the speed a little bit, it'll start going. And I say, boom, bee, I'll play my instrument. And then it'll wait a second and it'll play another one. So you can get to start spitting out random intervals at you. Once you're good at that, or once I was good at that, there's a melody tab. Now, I would suggest people on the melody tab, there's a whole bunch of different selections they can make. Single note, chromatic scale, major scale, diatonic. The problem with these is they start sounding random. So there's one called a blues scale. You'd think this would be blues licks, but if you play it, this is what it sounds like. I'll just give you a demonstration.
We can't hear your computer sound, Joe.
Oh, you can't hear
Beep, beep, boop, boop, beep,
Really?
beep, beep, boop, boop, boop.
You can't hear
Doesn't
that?
sound
No.
like
No.
blues at all.
Oh, okay.
Beep, beep, beep,
Anyway.
boop, 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 beep, beep.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. So you couldn't hear the intervals. Anyway.
No, it's all right. No, we
All
didn't
right.
need to. It was making sense until
All right.
then.
All right. Anyway, there's a selection on here called keys for scale patterns. Okay, so there are 4-note little patterns. You can hear this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Let me turn that up.
Beep, beep,
So
beep,
they'll
boop.
play a little something melodic or it'll play a little melodic 4-note thing. You don't know what key it's in, you don't know what note it starts on, but it'll play it. So you can start, you play it, you sing it, then you try to play it on your horn. You hear it, you sing it, you try to play it on your horn. And after a while, you'll start getting much better at that, okay? Then he has then they have longer ones you can do, an 8-note one, and you can play them faster. And then they have one called Jazz Licks that's a little better and different. So I started doing that. Then he has a whole chord tab. So I started with triads. So, and I would try to play da 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 da, and then another random would pop up, and I'd try to play that until I could do that on the root, and then I'd outline the chord on the root, and then I'd start to pick out the thirds, then I'd start to pick out the fifths, and then you can do any chord you want. You can do. Now a classical player would just, when I do this clinic at the conferences, it's not a jazz clinic, so I tell people to do major triads, minor triads, and dominant 7 chords. And if you get where you can hear those and play off of any of those notes, you are massively better than most musicians out there. Just that. Not improvising, not being a jazzer, just being able to hear a chord and outline it on your instrument puts you so far ahead. I mean, that would put you ahead of probably 98% of people in the Navy band when I was in it. Most people can't do anything like that. So that was kind of the chord tab. And then it being a jazzer on this thing, he has the same thing except with rhythm section. So if I wanted to spit out random, let's say I'm working on a Rich Madison lick that goes over a major 7th chord. I can learn the lick, but then I can have that program spit out random major 7th chord. So instead of just thinking the lick, now I'm hearing that. I have to hear the lick in my head, and then I have to be able to play it immediately.
It's very practical.
And it is life changing. It is not just practical. It'll change the whole way you approach your instrument.
And it's free.
It's free, and it's something that the reason I'm on my soapbox is because the longer I've been doing this and the more I realize how differently I play now than how I used to play, I'm absolutely convinced that this is how we should be teaching music. We teach music, so when we're babies and we learn how to talk, we don't learn how to read first and talk later. We learn how to talk, and then after we're speaking, somebody shows us a book and said, you know that tuh sound you've been making? That's a T. There it is. Tuh, T.
Oh, there you go.
But you learn the sound first, and then you learn how it sees how it sees on the page. So
what point, if ever, do you
So-
end up worrying about jazz harmony or getting into more esoteric
well,
theoretical
it just
stuff?
depends on whether you want to learn how to play jazz. But I would submit that it doesn't
Starting here.
matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter what kind of style or music you want to play. I am firmly convinced that this is how we need to be teaching music. This is what I say in my clinics. So I do these clinics for players that are very good. They're usually college teachers or very advanced college players, or they're good players. They all can play their socks off. And yet...
Oh, that was awesome. And yet, this is fantastic. Oh man, that's the best.
You just said the whole thing, and yet, and it was perfectly
And then it
frozen.
cut off?
Perfectly frozen.
Okay.
And yet,
And
what?
The
yet-
meaning of life is
Am I back?
You're back.
Am I
You're
back
back.
yet? Okay. And yet, so I start this clinic by saying, it's so-and-so's birthday. We're going to sing happy birthday. And I say, and I go, happy birthday. And we all sing happy birthday starting on that note. Right? They don't know what that note is, but they sing it easy. They're all professional musicians. They sing it. No problem. Everybody can sing happy birthday. No problem. And they say, oh, that's awesome. Let's pick up our horns and play that same tone. They pick up their horns.
Is that
Nothing. Terrified. Now, these are good players that have been playing for 20, 30, 40 years. Some of them are in orchestras. Some of them are college professors. Why is it that, and I am not slamming that particular group. You could say the same thing about the Navy Band, any professional orchestra out there. Why are we training musicians to play with the best tone possible, and yet they can't play happy birthday to you? They can't, or if they can, they're terrified, or they could do it in one key but not another. Why? We shouldn't be able to sing. We shouldn't be able to be professional musicians at this stage in our life and be able to not play what we can sing. That is wrong. It is wrong,
That's
and
a
it needs,
really powerful.
it needs to
sentence.
stop.
Yeah,
It
you're
needs
right.
to stop.
I mean, you're right.
So I beg, if you're a college professor, and I say this in my clinics, if you're a college professor out there, please change the way you teach, think about the way you teach, and start testing this. Why do we have scale juries? Why are we in college playing harmonic minor scales at the end of a semester, and we can't play Mary Had a Little Lamb or whatever? We can't do it, and nobody's testing it, and nobody's making us do it. Nobody is holding our feet to the fire for ear training, and yet we wouldn't ever let somebody graduate with a performance degree that couldn't make a sound on their instrument well. They couldn't make a good tone. We insist that they make a good tone. We insist that they learn how to sight read. We insist that they know scales. We insist that they know solos. Ear training, nothing. Nothing. Not a word. Nothing. No requirements, no demands, no thought. And it's wrong.
And so much of how ear training is taught still is not. It's not functional.
It's
Same-
theoretical ear
Yes,
training,
exactly.
which I'm not slamming that at all. I think that's great. I think it has its place. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right,
I'm
I know.
talking about being able to play what you can sing.
Yeah,
If you can sing it, you should be able to pick up your horn and play it. I still can't. I'm better at it. I'm getting better all the time.
Right.
And the thing is that you can learn this just as much as easily as you learn anything else. You can learn it just like you learn how to make a good sound on your instrument, just like you learn how to read music. This is just as teachable. As a matter of fact, it's in some ways a lot more fun and easily taught than other things.
So at this site, or if you've created a thing, is it obvious where to start and how to progress?
Well, that's what I was just talking about. You know,
That's the order.
You don't have to start with intervals, but it's a good, easy place to start. Those 4-note melodies are, I think, in some ways even easier than the intervals. I think it's easier to hear, you know, that's almost easier to hear than,
Yeah, that
because
makes sense.
it's melodic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there'll be 8 notes. I wish I could play it.
This is a great tool. I'm really glad you. I have
Well,
a feeling this will be one of those situations where there was the day before I knew this was a thing, and the day after I realized this was a thing. But
But
it's
now you
always
don't
been a
have to-
spooky thing to me, and
and
just
that's
never
my-
found a
but
good
that's-
entry point. But this seems
That's
like
my
a good entry
point.
point.
That's my point. Is it shouldn't be a spooky thing because this is how we should be teaching from the very beginning. Which I'm going to tell you a quick story. My son, Johnny, my older son, trumpet player, fine trumpet player, 4-time Texas All-State, fabulous. He's an all-star. He's a rock star. He's out in California now going to school. He's not a music major, thank goodness. He's a material science major, but he still plays this. He's taken lessons from the guy in the San Francisco Ballet and Opera. I can't remember the guy's name. Fabulous player. Anyway,
Adam Luffman.
That might
He's
be
the
it.
principal in the opera.
Gerard Farquhar?
He's an old knucklehead friend of mine.
He's a fabulous teacher, and Johnny loves it. But
Great.
Back to Johnny. So Johnny started playing trumpet when he was in the 5th grade. They didn't start in school till the 6th grade. So I gave him a trumpet. I did not give him music. No music. I gave him buttons. I showed him the first 5 notes. You know? First 5 notes, right? And then we started doing some ear training. I would play a note on the piano, and he'd have to find which one of those 5 notes that was. Which one is that, Johnny? Which one is that? This took him 2 days. He had this done. I mean, it was quick. And then we started 2 notes. And then, and eventually, I started playing little. And he played da da dee dee da da da. He'd play that whatever I played it, and then we would add a note, and I added the top one. So. So we did this for about a year. I didn't give him any music. When he started 6th grade, his first little solo for solo and ensemble, I did not give it to him. I taught it to him by ear. It was the, there's a trumpet. I can't remember what it was. It's a trumpet concerto or it's a serious trumpet piece that high schoolers play, but we only did the slow movement part of it. We only did the easier part of it. But I taught him by ear, and I played piano for him, and we went in and played it. And he absolutely knocked it out of the park. He sounded like a professional player because it was just sounds to him. It wasn't stuff on a page. Mm-hmm. And then we got out the music books and we started to learn how to read after that. And he's a fabulous reader now. He reads fine, great sight reader. But because I taught him that way to begin with, he can still play by ear. Still. And he doesn't even.
You know, when we were coming up, that was taboo, like to
Yes.
learn by rote. And when I was
Yes.
in music education, to teach by rote or learn by rote was the opposite of that was bad teaching.
Yes. And I heartily disagree. I think it's the best way to teach. I think it's how we should be teaching. And then we should work. Everybody's so scared. Oh, you're not going to learn how to read. Well, when you're teaching a baby to talk, you don't teach him to talk. Oh, God. Right?
He froze again.
Yeah.
I'm so confused by his
And then he
internet connection
froze.
because it's pristine and then it like freezes, but then it's pristine and then it freezes. And I think that we are supposed to.
Thanks,
Come back.
Joe.
You want me to shut this whole mess downstairs?
No. We're fine. Let's wrap this and then let's go to the bonus episode. And then we'll.
I was going to have him give us some practicing. Yeah. So let's see if we can pull this off. The Practicing Corner presented by Hitz Academy Practice Coaching. We're going to have you give us a practicing tip. Do you ever want to get more done in less time in the practice room? Like compound interest in a bank account, making yourself even just 10% more efficient in the practice room, which my brain is racing now with what he just shared. It's awesome. It will make you a better practicer forever, and those results will continue to compound for literally the rest of your career. Let Practice Coaching from Hitz Academy help you implement systems that will improve every aspect of your practicing routine. Do better at auditions and unlock your true potential as a musician. You can learn more at practicecoach.link/coaching. Joe, what do you got for us for a practicing tip?
I don't know. There's a lot of things I could talk about, but since we're on the ear training kick, I will just continue to bash on that. And I would say for everybody out there, please just realize that the oral connection to your horn, and by that I mean the connection between your singing voice and your playing, needs to be developed, and you need to work on it a little bit every day. And I know you got a lot to practice. I know you have solos and etudes and your teachers are overwhelming you. In the long run, you will learn everything faster if you make this connection. So go on the ear training site, start with 5 or 10 minutes a day and just do some ear training. Don't think about theory. It's just sounds and buttons. Don't think about intervals. Don't think about keys. Just sing the sounds and try to find the buttons that fit those sounds. No theory.
That
You don't want
5 to 10 minutes thing is huge because I think there's this thought, oh, well, now I have to find another 2 hours a day to do this. You don't.
If you do it for 5 or 10 minutes, you'll start having so much fun that you will want to do it more. It is so fun now that I have to make myself stop doing it to work on something else, because it's after a while it's really fun. So that would be my practice tip.
And there's a lesson there too, and I could not possibly agree with you anymore about how important this is to playing. But the 5 minutes a day thing goes for so many things. It's like if you do a little bit, James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits about how you need to like set goals that are almost harder to not achieve than they are to achieve. Like he says to set a goal of doing 1 push-up a day. And as long as it's like somewhere where you see it, it's like it's actually harder to talk yourself into the fact that you're too busy to get down on the floor and take 4 seconds to do 1 push-up. And then he says, and then after not long, you're down there, you're like, I might as well do 2. And then it becomes 2, but you don't start with 25. And then that second day, your arms are like wasted, tired, understandably, if you go from 0 and you know, and then it gets, and so this, and I feel like I said this recently on somewhere. I talk too much. But anyway,
it's true.
It is true.
Me too.
That Pat Sheridan, you know, he's one of the most accurate brass players I've ever heard on any instrument. He never talks about accuracy. He talks about air and he talks about ear. And he always says that if your air is great and if your ear is great, then the accuracy comes along for the ride. And so if you're like, this is going to help you to like play Charlier etudes better long term, you know, and to read them faster.
That's why I think buzzing is useful. I think people think they're developing their lips. Actually, what they're developing is their ears.
Yeah, there you go. And you got to have great air to be able to buzz with a good sound and to buzz like in a in a musical manner. It checks a lot of boxes. Good stuff.
Can I ask you guys? Oh, are we going into bonus land?
We're going to go into bonus land in just a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe, for your wisdom and your passion. It's too bad that doesn't feel stronger about this ear training thing. I just it seems a little tepid. Tepid endorsement.
I am a product of our musical educational system, which has very much shorted me in this way.
Right.
Well, it's clearly an issue because he keeps freezing up. Just when he starts talking about it.
Yeah, the man is listening to us. Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, no. No, you're fine. You're fine. We've never had a guest whose internet is pristine except for like when it freezes. That's very funny. There's there's usually like gets a little weird and a little pixelated. You're like crystal clear. And I think it's the censors. They don't want you talking about the ear training. It's gonna free the masses from the shackles of written music. Yeah. So if you, Joe, we're gonna have you hang on here for the bonus episode, which is available to all of our Patreon patrons. If you go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, you will learn how you can support the show. We got a lot of ongoing expenses, so heartfelt thank you to everyone who has done that. And to you get access to a lot of Lance is doing absolutely ridiculous things right now on camera. Those of you who are only listening should feel lucky. Joe, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Lance. You're really as passionate as Joe is about ear training. I am passionate about what you bring to the table here for the brass.
I'm mostly passionate about Lance.
Yeah. You guys, I can tell you're both sincere. I appreciate it.
And that
I really do.
And that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.